So, I want to do something a little different today. I want to give you a real, honest, unfiltered look at where Americans actually stand financially right now. Not the version the media shows you when they're talking about Mark Zuckerberg buying a $170 million compound or some hedge fund manager's art collection. The real version, the version that actually applies to the majority of people living and working in this country right now. Because here's the thing, most people have no idea how they compare financially to everyone around them. And that matters. Not because you should spend your life playing a comparison game, that's a miserable way to live, but because if your goal is to build wealth, get ahead and eventually stop trading your time for a paycheck. You need to know where the starting line actually is. You need an honest benchmark, and that's exactly what today is about. So let's start at the beginning. Income. The median household income in the United States right now is around $84,000 a year. That means half of all households earn more than that and half earn less, right in the middle. But that number alone doesn't tell you much because income is heavily tied to age and where you are in your career. So let me break it down more honestly. If you're under 25, the median household income is somewhere between $38,000 and $42,000 a year. You're just starting out! That's expected! Between 25 and 34, that number jumps into the low $60,000 range as careers start developing and skills start compounding. Between 35 and 44, you're typically looking at $78,000 to $85,000. And your peak earning years, which for most people fall between 45 and 54. Put the median somewhere between $88,000 and $95,000 a year. Now, here's what I want you to notice about those numbers. Even at the absolute peak of your earning potential, more than half of all Americans are still making less than 6 figures a year. And I'll be direct with you, 6 figures in 2025 is not what it was 10 years ago. When you factor in what housing costs, what groceries costs, what health insurance costs, and what it actually takes to save meaningfully for retirement, $100,000 a year in most major cities is a comfortable working class income at best. The finish line has moved and a lot of people haven't been told. But income is only part of the story. And honestly, it might not even be the most important part. Let me tell you about 2 people. The first one is a guy I'll call Marcus. Marcus is 52 years old. He's been an engineer his whole career. Always earned good money. Peaked at around $120,000 a year in his early 50s. Nice car. Big house in the suburbs. Annual vacations. The whole picture. But Marcus also financed everything. New car every 3 years. Home equity loan to redo the kitchen. Credit cards that never quite got paid off. Always meaning to start investing seriously, but never quite getting around to it. Marcus's net worth today at 52 is around $180,000. Most of it tied up in home equity. Then there's a woman I'll call Sandra. Sandra is a school librarian. Never made more than $58,000 a year in her life. Drove the same Honda for 11 years. Never carried a credit card balance. Started putting 15% of every paycheck into a retirement account at 28 years old and never stopped. Sandra's 52 years old too. Her net worth is just under $600,000. Same age. Dramatically different outcomes. Not because of income. Because of behavior. That is the single most important financial lesson I can give you, and the data backs it up completely. Now, let's talk about what people are actually spending, because this is where most financial stories fall apart. Households under 25 spend somewhere between $28,000 and $32,000 a year. By 25 to 34, that number climbs to $55,000 to $60,000. Between 35 and 44, you're looking at $70,000 to $75,000 annually just to maintain your lifestyle. And at your peak earning years between 45 and 54, the average household is spending $78,000 to $83,000 a year. Now, pair that with the income numbers I just gave you. At peak earning years, the median household brings in around $90,000 and spends around $80,000. That leaves roughly $10,000 a year before taxes, before any debt payments, before any savings or investing. $10,000 a year of breathing room. And those are median numbers. Half of Americans have even less margin than that. This is why most people feel like they can never get ahead. It is not laziness. It is not stupidity. It is math. The gap between what life costs and what people earn has been closing for years, and for a lot of households, it has already closed completely. You get a raise and groceries go up. You paid down a credit card and the car needs new brakes. It feels like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. And the debt picture makes this even more stark. The average American adult carries around $63,000 in total debt right now in 2026. That includes mortgages, car loans, student loans, and credit cards. Strip out the mortgage and the number drops significantly, but the non-mortgage debt alone is still crushing people. Credit card balances are at all-time highs. Auto loan delinquencies are rising, and the average household is now operating at a debt-to-income ratio of 30% or higher. Let me explain what that actually means in real life. If your household earns $100,000 a year and you're at a 30% debt-to-income ratio, you are spending $30,000 a year, $2,500 every single month just on debt payments before you eat, before you pay utilities, before you put gas in your car. A third of everything you earn is gone before you've lived a single day of your life. That is not building wealth. That is running in place while the ground slowly gives way beneath you. Now let's get to the number that I think matters most. Net worth. Because net worth is the scoreboard. It's the end result of every financial decision you've ever made. Every dollar you earned, every dollar you spent, every dollar you saved, every dollar you invested or didn't invest. It all shows up here. For people under 35 years old, the median net worth is around $39,000. Between 35 and 44 years old, that climbs to $136,000. Between 45 and 54 years old, it reaches $247,000. Between 55 and 64 years old, you're looking at around $365,000. And between 65 and 74 years old, the median sits around $410,000. Now, use those numbers as your benchmark. If you're 38 years old and you have $200,000 in net worth, you are meaningfully ahead of the median. If you're 50 years old and you have $400,000 in net worth, you are well ahead of where most people your age stand. And if those numbers make you uncomfortable because you're behind, good! That discomfort is useful. That's the feeling that motivates change before it's too late. But here's the retirement reality that I think should genuinely alarm people. Around 40 to 45% of households approaching retirement age right now have less than $100,000 saved, not $100,000 short of their goal. Total, less than $100,000 in savings and investments after 40 years of working. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, that is $4,000 a year to live on from your savings. Combined with the average Social Security benefit of around $2,071 a month, which works out to roughly $25,000 a year. You are looking at a retirement income of maybe $29,000 annually if everything goes according to plan. And Social Security is not guaranteed to stay where it is. The trust fund is facing real structural pressure over the next decade, and nobody in Washington is having an honest conversation about it. And here's the part that people really don't account for: longevity. Life expectancy keeps climbing. A 65-year-old man today is statistically expected to live into his early 80s. The average woman into her mid-80s. And for couples, there is better than a 50% chance that at least one spouse lives past 90. That means retirement could last 25 or 30 years. Running out of money at 78 is not a hypothetical. It is a real and increasingly common outcome. And the people it happens to are not people who are careless or irresponsible. Many of them worked hard their entire lives. They just didn't have the information or the margin to prepare the way they needed to. Only 2.5% of Americans have $1 million or more saved, specifically in retirement accounts. If you zoom out and look at overall net worth, including home equity and other assets, about 18% of Americans qualify as millionaires. But half of that net worth for most people is locked up in a house they're living in, which means it's not generating income. It's not liquid, and the only way to access it is to sell the house or borrow against it. So what does all of this mean, and what do you actually do with it? The wealth-building mindset shift that separates the people who end up okay from the people who don't comes down to one fundamental change in how you think about money. You stop seeing income as the goal, and you start seeing assets as the goal. Income is what you trade your time for. Assets are what? Work while you sleep. The stock market, a business, real estate, precious metals, anything that holds value and compounds over time. The people in the top 0.1% of wealth in this country have increased their share of national wealth by over 60% since 1989. The bottom 50% have seen their share fall by 46% over that same period. That gap did not happen because rich people worked harder. It happened because they own things that grow while they sleep, and most people don't own anything at all. The practical version of this is not complicated. It just requires consistency. You start by getting your debt-to-income ratio below 15%, meaning your monthly debt payments represent less than 15% of your monthly income. That frees up cash flow. Then you take that freed up cash and you put it somewhere that compounds consistently, automatically, without exception. You don't wait for the right moment. You don't wait until you feel ready. You start with whatever you have and you build a habit before you build a balance. The people who retire with real financial security are not always the highest earners in the room. They are almost always the most consistent ones. They started early. They stayed boring. They ignored the noise. And 20 or 30 years later, they are the ones with options, while everyone else is trying to figure out how to make Social Security stretch. You now have the real numbers. You know where the average American stands at every stage of life? The only question left is what you're going to do with that information. If this hit home, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And go watch the video on screen right now. It connects directly to everything we just covered. See you in the next one.